We've been talking about samadhi, and that's the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras. And samadhi, as it's taught in this tradition, relates to, we're going to go ahead and start again with Sutras 2 and 3. Samadhi is experienced when fluctuations and changes in the meditator's awareness are restrained and pacified. Sutra 3, the seer, that's you, then consciously abides in its own nature. Now, those of you who've been here other sessions, I always go back to these two sutras because these are the main keys to understanding what yoga practice is about. And what yoga practice is doing is helping you disidentify with the stuff you're not, so that you can know the stuff that you are. Right? And the stuff that you are is really the stuff. But it is a witnessing presence which is eternal and which is beyond time and space. And this is so important because if you are identified with that space within you, then whatever happens outside of you doesn't really matter so much. You can live more effectively in the world because you're not attached to the results of your actions. You're not afraid of things. And when that happens, your life happens naturally and spontaneously. And your karma, or your tendencies, they exhaust themselves. Oftentimes, with yoga, people think that one needs to renounce everything in order to wake up. They need to renounce possessions or relationships or whatever that might be, or even jobs. They want to hide out in the mountains and meditate for days on end. But the reason that's not helpful is because you're here, you're embodied, because you have things that need to be expressed. You have thoughts, emotions, memories, things that you've put out into the ethers. And the seeds have been sown. Right? Now, the way you do not create any more seeds, the way you do not create any more problems for yourself, or even joys for yourself, because they kind of end up in problems anyway, is by staying with that witnessing awareness, which has no desires. Okay, I believe Maharishi Mahesh Yogi of the TM movement, he says you want to have desireless desires, and that can be hard to understand when you're first trying to get your mind around it. But what it means is, for example, you're sitting where you are and you're trying to figure out, well, what do I do today, or what should I do in my life today? And instead of thinking about all these compulsions that you have, what other people told you should be doing, or what you think you should be doing to be a good person, you just sit and you tune into that stillness within and see what comes up. Whatever you're impelled, inspired to do, which is constructive, negative things, you want to restrain those, and that's part of yoga practice as well. But any constructive, worthwhile action is allowed to express. And that can be anything as easy from washing your clothes to building a business to cooking dinner to taking a walk, any of those things. These are all constructive things that need to be allowed to express. Because if you try to restrain too much of your life, like renounce everything in your life, you create sort of a mental, psychological tension, which ruins your inner peace. Because you're trying to do what you think is right, rather than what, say, natural law or the divine consciousness is impelling you to do. That said, one more time, samadhi is experienced when fluctuations and changes in the meditator's awareness are restrained and pacified. The seer then consciously abides in its own nature, or its own essence. All right. Now, we've already gone through Sutras 1 through 15. So let's start on 16. Now, Sutra 16 reads, higher and more easily practiced detachment results from self-realization that makes one impervious to the influences of cosmic forces. Vedic astrology is the astrology of yoga, so they go together. It's a system of enlightenment. And the idea is that all these tendencies, all these karmas, all these habits that you have that allow you to see the world in certain ways, that make you reactive in certain ways to the world. These are like cosmic forces, the way they influence you and they trigger things. It's like when you're going through your life and everything's going great, and then all of a sudden you have a relationship issue, or something comes up with your business, or you have a money issue. Everything's going great, but then there's this blip. And the blip occurs because within you there is that seed state for it to occur. Nothing can happen to you if the potential is not within you. And in Vedic astrology, everyone has their birth chart. Everyone has a particular molecular structure. And so just like Jane can meet someone and think the person's just a totally nice guy, very happy, very pleasant, but then Jack can meet the person and think this is just a total jerk. All right? That's because Jane has a whole different set of ways she sees this person, or people in general, okay, as opposed to Jack. Now, that said, as you're interacting with the world, you exhaust and you trigger and you go through and you are reactive with your karma. Okay? And the reason you practice yoga is to detach from that karma. Okay? So as long as you are attached to what you're experiencing, what's happening with you, it's going to perpetuate itself. So anything that's going on with you that you don't like or that you do like, it's there because you are identifying with it. And when you identify with it, you keep it going. You stay within the rounds of rebirth. You know, so when you incarnate, you do that because you have a desire, you have a need, you have a want, you have something that you want to be doing in the world. And it doesn't matter if it's good or it's bad. Anything that's within your sphere of experience is happening because you want it to happen on some level. On some level, okay? That can be hard to swallow, but when a person can really accept that for themselves and take responsibility, then they have the ability to change it, okay? They have the ability to see it, to detach from it, or do whatever they need to move beyond it. If there are things that are within your life that you do not take responsibility for, you have no power to change it. Okay? It might go away eventually, but it's best if you acknowledge it, that it's coming from within you in some way. And that is the practice of yoga. It's about being self-aware. We talk about self-realization here. Knowing what you are at the innermost state of your being, which is the witnessing of presence, the observer, like we mentioned at the first few sutras, but also it is the creator of the reality that you're experiencing. Going back to the Vedic astrology aspect of things, a lot of people have negative factors within their charts, within their astrological makeup, and a relatively unconscious person might be like, well, you know, there's nothing I can do about that. This is terrible. I can't make any money, or I've got bad health, or whatever it might be. So that's all I can do about it. Just let it happen, right? But if you're a yogi and your goal is to wake up and to experience your full power, which is not an egotistic power, not pride, it's just who you are, what you are. The yogi says, okay, I see I have this going on in my life, now what can I do to change it? What can I do to take responsibility for this? Alan Watts, any of you familiar with Alan Watts? Yeah, well, he's a fun guy to listen to. And he was an English philosopher. He was very much into Taoism. And he would talk about that we are all God. At the deepest level, and even at the external level, we are all God in some way. And he says, you know, the problem is we don't accept that. And that's kind of like a false modesty. Okay? We're not accepting that we are this power. And the yogi, even though they play their role in life as the person, as with the past history and all the things they want to do, really this is an expression of that God. This is an expression of that one being which is here, experiencing itself. Higher detachment results from self-realization that makes one impervious to the influence of cosmic forces. Remember what we said about renunciation. It's not about giving things up, and it's not about not doing things. It's about being detached so that you are the kind of like a disinterested or uninterested observer. So you go to your work, you do your work, you don't think you are doing your work. You know that your work is being done through you, because you, the real you, is that witnessing thing, that presence. So you're sitting there right now. There's a part of you which is always there, which is always watching. You're watching me now, or you're aware of your internal states, but if you go out and you do other things, there's still this thing which is there all the time.